Welcome back to another Wednesday on the Pagan Perspective. I'm your Wednesday host, Yeka, and this week we are talking about a subject that I am very passionate about and super excited to get to be sharing with you. So, Mama Willow wants to know about raising or including our family in our practices. So they write, how do you begin, or where would you begin in making the transition from solitary practice to family practice? I've been solitary for 10 plus years. Now I have a partner and 2 toddlers, and I'm lost on where to start including them. So I'll start by saying that I have 2 children. I have an almost 3-year-old and a 5-month-old, and usually I try not to have them in the videos with me, but the weather is crazy out there right now, so I can't be filming outside, so I've got to be inside. So I've got this one with me today. So if I do have to do a few more edits than I normally would, I do apologize. I don't really like doing the jumps, but if he gets a little bit fussy, which seems like he might be getting a little bit fussy, then I might have to stop and do some jumps. So we are a pagan family, and we're raising our children as such. I have always been a pagan and have been with my husband, my partner, for 8 years now. So this was a process that I also went through. And I want to start by, so I'll get into some of the specifics that we as a family have done, but I'm going to start by saying that I can speak personally to, oh my goodness, do you want your hedgehog? Do you want your hedgehog? No? The hedgehog is... Yeah? Oh, maybe? Maybe you want the hedgehog? So the little guy was having a little trouble sitting still, which is pretty reasonable for a 5-month-old. I'll touch on that topic in a little bit. But what I was going to say is that I can speak to raising toddlers and infants from personal experience, because that is the age of the children that I have. I have been involved in my nieces and nephews' lives and taking care of children for much of it, but my personal experience with my own children, raising them, is with the ages that I have. So when I talk about the ideas for raising or including children and teenagers, those are ideas we have, but those are not things that we have implemented yet. For toddlers and infants, I actually did a video on my personal channel, so I'll go ahead and put a link to that up in the cards and in the description box below if you want to check that out in more detail. This video, I'll paraphrase some of that, but won't go into quite as much because this is a broader topic. So to start with, something that I want to establish is the idea of my practice versus our practice. So I have my own practice, and this kind of touches on my view of people's responsibilities in general, and that is that the individual's first responsibility is themselves, because that is the only person that they have control over. And then from there, it moves out to the whatever social structure that they're set up in, whether that's the family and larger community, etc. But even with a spouse, now my partner, my husband, and I have been together for 8 years, and have always been a pagan, but we have been together 8 years and have had our practice together for 8 years. I have maintained my own personal practice, and then we have our practice together, which now includes our children as well. And it's in the same way that we are still individuals with our own thoughts and dreams and opinions and all of that, but we're also in a partnership. So circles within circles. So when I think about including the family, including my partner and children, we are creating our own practice together, and that may be influenced by my personal practice, but it's not that I'm inviting them into my practice. I'm not including them in mine. Now, there may be some practices that I decide to share and make part of ours, but but it is a shared thing, and that shared, I think, is really, really critical. So I'll start with the relationship with my partner in terms of having our practice. And our form of paganism is very much about practice, not so much about belief, although there are a couple core beliefs like we are part of nature, the seasons are important, or the seasons are sacred, right? That sort of thing. But communication is really, really key. So our style, we actually literally sit down together and talk about what our values are, our shifting values, what's going on, is that matching, is that meeting that? And we try very hard to practice nonviolent communication when there is serious conflict. The principles of restorative justice have been very, very helpful for us. And so we approach it from that direction of looking for a solution-oriented discussion and doing so in a way that is really safe, that we are able to share, to truly share with each other, and from there develop out what is important to us. As our children grow, we hope that to be including them in that, and we probably at that point will call it family circle. Now, our children are pretty pre-verbal. I mean, the oldest is starting, she's got some sentences, but they're usually limited to perhaps more immediate needs and very few words. But before we know it, she's going to not be a toddler, she's going to be a kid, and then a teenager with much more sophisticated understanding and ideas. And so we really hope to be including her in that. And so that communication is really important. And that everybody have an equal voice. So there are sometimes things in our practices that might not be age appropriate. So, and that's just has to do with developmentally. So trying to get my 5-month-old to sit still with me while I filmed this video, not really a reasonable expectation on my part. That doesn't mean that we can't invite participation, but I think that not getting upset when someone is not at a place where they can do certain things that aren't particularly realistic for them. So is it really realistic for me to expect my 3-year-old to sit through a ritual in which she has to sit on her hands, be quiet, and listen to a poem being recited? Not really. That's not realistic. But if I was going to be performing one of those and she was to be invited to it, the boundary would need to be very clear that to participate in this, here are the boundaries. Not moving goalposts or any of that shenanigans, but clear from the very beginning. This is what is expected. But again, not very realistic to expect that from my 3-year-old. So if I was to be doing a ritual that was to include her, then I would want to create something or we could create something together that would fit where she was at. So that might be something more like running around in circles in the rain and yelling thank you to the clouds, right? That might be an appropriate type of ritual for a kid, for someone of that age. Now, a 6 or 7-year-old, they still probably would enjoy running in the rain, but their comprehension and their ability to sit for periods of time or to concentrate for periods of time is going to be different. So depending on where each kid is at, and I'm using ages, but every person is an individual and their abilities are going to be different. We can make generalizations based on age, but it's important to remember that people are not the generalizations. Let me see what else I had here. So a couple of So I talked about the invitation for inclusion with the really clear boundaries and expectations. But another thing that I think is really important, and this was done with me and something that I'm very grateful for, when I was a child, I remember being asked for my consent to be taught things. So there's learning that we do that happens through actions by watching what our parents are doing or the people around us are doing. But there's also learning that happens from direct lessons that are given to us, where things are explained to us and techniques are explained and we practice things. So I can remember being, 8, 9 years old and my father inviting me to learn some visualization techniques and me saying, yes, I do want to learn that. And my values say that that is so important to have that consent, to acknowledge the agency and free will, the liberty and freedom of that individual. So for us, that's really important to invite the learning, but not to force our concepts. So we're not theists, but if we were, we certainly would never try and push belief of a God on our child. No more so than we would really want to push disbelief of deities on our child. When it comes to concepts like that, I think that the permission is so critical. So to share a little bit about how we've approached this, some of our practices for including our children starts with, for us, the observation of and celebration of the holidays and the seasons. So we very much center on the Wheel of the Year, and that's something that we actually, my partner and I, developed through conversation, through our circles together, in looking at what was important to us and really spending time in reflection on that. So we celebrate the holidays. And I also have another video on my personal channel about what the Wheel of the Year is to us. I'll include that in the cards and the description as well if you want to check that out. So we'll have a sort of feast day, a celebration on the holidays, and then we will take part in whatever is happening with the seasons. So right now it's the beginning of spring for us. So this is a time period of going back out into the woods and of planting, and it's windy, and we make sure to spend time with that, which leads into another very critical core practice for us, which is sun time and star time. We make a point to be outside every day in the sun. Well, the days that there are some, but that's almost all of them. But we go outside every day, and we go outside every night. And that's actually a time where the toddler does sit very still. She'll sit on my lap and we look at the stars together. But my husband doesn't actually participate in the star time very often unless there's a meteor shower. And so that's just it's not something that we force to happen. It's something that I do with the children, and we share that practice together. But it's not a rigid dogmatic thing. Another thing that we've done with the kids is that we've actually used chants as lullabies for them. So I'll include a link to a playlist that I found. A lot of the chants actually come from the reclaiming tradition. So, like We Are a Circle Within a Circle, or Earth and Ocean, Sand and Rolling Seas, the element chants, things like that are ones that we use as lullabies, and we use just singing around the house. We think that that will probably last with the kids for their whole lives, right? You can remember, I bet, singing Mary Had a Little Lamb and Where's Thumbkin and all of those things. Those are still with you today and are somewhere very, very deep inside you. And so the songs that we sing to them, we hope to give them as a gift for that. So especially, let me talk about toddlers for just a second here. I'm getting a little bit long, sorry. So toddlerhood is this beautiful, beautiful time period in which the kind of lofty conceptual ideas. No, they're not dealing with those yet. What they're dealing with is forming their understanding, the context for what is this world? What is this that they participate in? What's their place in it? And because of that, well, I mean, it's a reflection of our values in general, but we spend a lot of time in simple observation with our toddler. I talk about that more in the Raising Pagan Children video on my personal channel. So most of what we do with toddlers is experiential. And yeah, there's crafts and things like that, but what is the quality of life? Now, when they get a little bit older and start to be able to grasp more concepts, then ideas can be built upon that. And by the time one reaches teenagehood, that's, I think, more about exploring and defining their own path, their own practices for themselves. And as parents, how can we support that? But at no point in my parenting philosophy do I think that it is my job to tell my children what to believe. I can model, I can present, and yes, there are some boundaries that I need to set, like we don't, hurt creatures for fun, right? Examples of there's just some very basic things there. But really, it's not my job to tell them who to be or what to believe, but to be there to support them. And so, in including family, that is where I'm coming from, including with my approach towards my partner. I would never think that it is my job to tell him how to believe or what to believe, and would be incredibly offended if he tried to do the same to me, as I would be if anyone tried to do the same to me. So I know that as soon as I stop recording, I will think of 10 things that I forgot to include, but I was very excited to share this video with all of you. I would love to know experiences from you guys. Do you have pagan family? Do you have family members that you share with that don't identify as pagan? Do you have children? What has been your approach with that? So thank you so much for listening this far, for sharing this with me, and until next week, take care.